I once heard a highly respected Christian psychologist say, all behavior is motivated. And at first I thought, well, duh, of course. But the more I've thought about it, the more significant that little comment is. Everything that we do is motivated by something. There is what it means is there is some reason behind everything we do. In that sense, there's nothing random about my behaviors. Now, they may appear random. They can be not well thought out, but there's always some motivation behind all behavior. Now, it takes a mature person to examine their own lives and think deeply enough to identify their own motive. And because this is not a simple thing to do, and because it takes a lot of mental, even emotional energy to do, there aren't very many people that actually evaluate their motives. Most people really, they just evaluate whether or not they liked what they got when they behaved in the way they did. And there are even some people who don't go there. Right? So the reason I'm saying this is because our faith, even our faith, has a motive behind it. What we do with or don't do about our faith is motivated. What's the motive? Well, you don't have to look. If all you had was the letter of 1 John and 2 John that we've looked at so far, there is a prevailing theme, and the theme is love. Now, in 2 John, we have just, for the last how many times, we've talked about an interesting thing that has to be connected with love, and that's if you go back to verse 6, John writes, and this is love, that we walk in obedience to his commands. You see, I don't think we can disconnect obedience and love. It's as though there's a behavior connected to love. And it's, for the Christian, it's obedience to God's commands. I say it all the time. I'm going to say it again. When I discover God's design, and isn't that what his commands are about? His commands inform us of his design. And when I discover his design, and then I learn to arrange my life around it, that's when the best stuff in life is going to happen. And so John gives us this thought. To obey the commands of God is high and noble and essential, even, I'd say. What's the motivation? The motivation is love. Now, we kind of poked around at it a little bit last time, and so we're going to talk about it a little more now on verse 8. Watch out that you do not lose what you have worked for, but that you may be fully rewarded. Okay. Here's why all this stuff on motivation. See, if my central motivation is for the reward, what I'm going to get, I think that could be insufficient. I see this kind of illustrated in my life and in the world. I would be dishonest to say that earning an income is not motivational for me. Yeah, it is. I have a motivation. But you can tell that in an organization where people are paid, You can tell the difference between a person whose motivation is just picking up a paycheck. I put in the hours, I show up, I pick up the paycheck. And the reward for showing up and putting in the hours is my paycheck. When it's all about the reward, those people over time, it becomes fairly obvious. But there are others who they have a deeper motivation. The mission of the organization, their own personal mission, and their contributions into the organization are actually a greater motivation than the paycheck. I've known people, and you have too, whose paycheck is small, right? The physical paycheck is small, and they are worth far more, but they are not motivated only by the paycheck. They're also motivated by the mission of this organization and their contribution into the mission. Well, let's think about God's family. Let's think about us in relationship to our faith and our walk with God. John, I can't eliminate the fact that John writes, watch out. He is saying, be careful, pay attention, that you do not lose what you have worked for. Now, you cannot work for your salvation. It's not possible. Your salvation is yours purely by the grace of God. Yes, you accept it by faith, but you can't earn or work for it. There is a sense, though, that my salvation is free, but my growth, my depth, my maturity comes at a cost of my effort. Does that make sense? My effort in partnership with God's grace will produce maturity in me, growth, depth in my life and faith. People who come to Christ, say yes to Him, and begin a journey of faith, there has to be something that will motivate them to stay on the journey. Now, some people are motivated just simply by the idea that I don't want to get punished for stepping out of line. Yeah, I mean, that if I was going to put that on a continuum of maturity, I'd put it way back toward the beginning, toward the not very mature side. But there is why did I come to Christ? For me? I didn't want to go to hell. Bad motive? No, not really. I mean, for an 8-year-old kid, that's about right. But if that's my only motive is getting out of hell and into heaven, and I'm stuck there, well, that's kind of sad. John writes, watch out that you do not lose what you have worked for. You can't lose your salvation. But so what was I working for? I was working for maturity. I can't get any more saved, okay? And I can't get any more loved by God. It's impossible for Him to treasure me any more than He does. So my maturity, my growth, my depth in relationship to Him is something I've worked for. It's not all about working. And I think there are times when the church has taught it is maybe not all about, but it is mainly about working, right? You're saved by grace. but now you gotta work. Yes and no. Yes, my growth and maturity requires my effort and investment. I think that's what John is saying. Watch out that you do not lose what you have worked for. How would you lose what you work for? How would you lose maturity? Well, I don't think you accidentally lose maturity. But I do think at times there is slippage. At times there is erosion. I have talked about this before, but I grew up here in Oklahoma, and in my growing up years, several of my friends lived out in the country, and to get to their homes, you drove on dirt roads. Dirt roads are ubiquitous in Oklahoma. And in the part of Oklahoma I grew up in, it's red dirt. There were places along those roads where the road, 1 week you're good, and you come back a couple of weeks later and the road had been eroded on the edge. Erosion works that way. Erosion works a little by a little by a little by a little until, boom, the road collapses. Well, this is one of the ways that it's possible to lose what you have worked for in terms of your maturity. It erodes and erodes and erodes. It's not big chunks at a time. It's just sometimes teeny little things. It's not paying attention to. I don't want to make it all about discipline, but there are disciplines that are required for growing, nurturing, and maintaining maturity. A simple one, the discipline of truth telling. If you give in a little bit on, well, I could have been more honest, or it's only a little white lie, or these are erosive. Over time, they will collapse your maturity. For sure, they will collapse your integrity. So there's a sense in which we work for our integrity. We work for our maturity. There is effort, there's investment there. And John says, his implication is, you can lose that. You can't lose your salvation, but you can lose these aspects, I don't know what else to call them, of your maturity, your growth. Then he goes on, but that you may be fully rewarded, or rewarded fully. So the point is, don't lose your integrity. Don't lose your maturity. Don't give that up. Be careful to nurture and maintain and discipline yourself so that you won't lose what you've worked for and that you'll get rewarded fully. What's the reward? Is that the motive? Is that what it's all about? I am doing this work in order to get rewarded. It can be, and for some it is. I think it doesn't have a long shelf life if that's all your motivation is. When love is my motivation, and I make effort to grow and maintain my growth, to mature and develop my maturity, to become a person of integrity, and to then do the things that are required to maintain that integrity. That's important. And what is the reward? Maybe John's talking about eternal reward, the reward you're going to get in heaven. I tend to not go there myself. What I'm looking at is, there are things in time, rewards for your maturity, for your integrity. If it's your only motivation, this reward, to me, that's a thin motivation. Let love be your motive. And then let the effort flow out of love. And one of the results is there are rewards. There are positive consequences and outcomes. It's enough to think about today. Come back next time with more on So Care with Stevie Boy.